Today I would like to discuss together an article by Professor George Magnus from Oxford University. He discusses what are the opportunities and challenges that China offers. At the very beginning, here's the summary. It's very important, which I agree with, by the way. It says that the new 5-year plan, the 14th 5-year plan, 2021-2026, is going to be focused on a self-reliance model. And it tends to have both demand and supply produced or demanded domestically. And then export is something that China will continue to do as usual, but it's not going to be as before. It's not going to be an economy dependent on export. By the way, this is something that has changed a lot in the last 10 years since 2010. China has made itself less reliant on export. Then we have a second sentence. But unless government recognize the limits of authoritarianism, top-driven directives and social control, it is unless government recognize those problems, then it's likely that innovation will have problem. It's likely to stifle innovation, and it will be, the goals, the development goals of the 5-year plan will be difficult to achieve. So basically, the author says that under the current system of authoritarianism and top-driven directive, China will not reach its goal. I tell you, I'm totally in disagreement with this sentence, because we don't have to like it, whether we like it or not, and we don't have to like it. We need to just learn what China does, study China, not necessarily judge it. We can also do that, but that's not the main point. We need to have an analytical approach, not ideological. But I disagree with this, because I actually think that it is just this way that China does things, the way that China structures its economy and its society, including the top-down directive. These are the characteristics, the strength of the central government that has allowed China to basically achieve all its social and economic objectives, or at least most of all. So I'm completely in disagreement with this, because any other approach, a more liberal, laissez-faire approach, will be creating a problem. It will be then that the goals will not be met. This is because the Chinese economy is stable and works, and the development process is based on the centralized control, so that central government decides who, which, when, which sector, which provinces decide. So it cannot, this economic development model cannot be left to private actors too much. Of course, let me clarify. China has a lot of private companies. It's not a Marxist system like we studied. The factors of production can be in the hand of private sectors, and you can make a lot of money. You can be very successful. But the market limits on the micro level. So individual companies can be successful, but it cannot drive the development of the country as a whole, because this remains and should remain in the hands of the government. So this sets the boundaries between government, between the state and the market. In China, the private companies are free to make money, to develop, to be very rich, super rich, provided their impact is not going to alter the system of the country. I think this is very important. So this is the general gist of Professor Magnus's article. he then starts by insisting that the reshaping of the economic development model is imperative, is more urgent. But I don't think it's correct. I don't see that urgency. Why should China adapt? At the end of the day, China never does a revolution. I know this sounds strange. The economic development model is not like the 1989 Eastern Europe Big Bang, almost overnight to change the system of Eastern Europe. No, China is using a trial and error model. So it tries some new model, see if it works. Sometimes the model is limited in space, in time. And if it succeeds, then it's expanded. So it's an evolutionary development model, not revolutionary. Slow or at the speed that they deem necessary, limited to the sectors, to the geographies, and within a period of time. So it's a multivariable, it's always a matrix, n variable matrix on within which the trial and error system operates. And then it can be expanded to longer period of time, to longer region, to other sectors. So do not expect any major economic revolution. So the 14th five-year plan is 140 pages, and I think my advice is you should read it. It tells us what China is planning to do. It gives us the environmental objectives. And so these are important indications. We do not do those plans because we don't have the agents that execute it, because we are more market-driven economies. So China does this very, very well. The plan, 5 years, 15 years, even 30 years. Now, for the first time, this is interesting. It does not include the GDP growth rate for the whole period. It only has 2021 at about 6%, but we don't have a GDP targets for the whole 5 year. Why? China, for the first time, wants to leave the door open to decide A, if it wants to grow by how much, or two, what quality of growth it wants to have. In the past, we have always been given numerical targets. Numerical targets they always meet, by the way. This time they want to leave themselves a little bit of flexibility. They want to leave themselves the flexibility to play on these two variables. Either the amount of growth, maybe 6%, or maybe they choose a lower growth in exchange for a better quality. And I think this is the choice that they will make. They will go along a path of lower GDP growth, but within that lower GDP growth, there will be a better quality. Meaning what? Maybe better equality, better improvement of the low-income people. Because what is China that China needs to do? It needs to transfer millions of people whose income is just above the poverty line towards the middle class, so that they can create a hardcore millions, 500, 600, 700 millions of people within the middle class. So the problem is not really to worry about the equality between the super rich and the poor, because it always captures the media attention. There will be always 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 millionaire billionaires. It really does not matter much, these extreme ratios. What China wants to do is to build a core of a large, very, very large middle class, which is relatively prosperous. And so the main goal is to raise their income of what is today low-income earners. So we're talking about 200 million farmers. Dual circulation, this is I agree. China will be less dependent on external demand. So for our foreign exporters, this is the opportunity, because this window of export may close over time as China needs less and less of foreign goods. Here, this is also important. China plans to boost economic consumption of the goods it produces. So it wants to be completely independent as much as possible from the rest of the world. It's not going to be autarkic, that it does not trade. Of course it will trade, but its success will not be relying on foreign trade. It will do it, it will be nice, it will be a plus, a nice cherry on the cake. So this is the concept of dual circulation. Before, in the 90s and even 2000, after the WTO entry, most of the growth were coming from export. From 2010 onwards, this is now changing. Like for example in Italy export to GDP is about 1/3, but this ratio is only 18% for China. So China export is only 18% of GDP. So it has already kind of decoupled from the international trade system. Another important factor is the China also planned to reform a little bit the hukou system, the residency system that divides citizens into rural and urban citizen. Every citizen has its own ID card, and it says whether the person lives in rural or urban area. Each of these two type of residency registration has some advantages and disadvantages. In the past, people would prefer the urban one because farmers that would move to the city, if they had the urban residency, they would have access to better access. Now, this difference, the advantages of the urban hukou is getting smaller. And in some cases I see that people do prefer rural residency instead of urban residency, because the rural hukou give right to using land, and this offers like a safety net for the farmers that move to the city to look for jobs. If they keep the rural hukou, they keep the land, and that means that should they encounter a problem, be unemployed, they need to return back to the homeland, to the village, they will still find their own 1,000, 2,000 square meters of land that give them subsistence. And I think this is a very, very strong psychological safety net. And that's why this hukou reform is a bit a tricky thing. And it's not like so easy that we should have all farmers give up this hukou, because then they give up the land and we kind of take the carpet out of their feet should they need it. And the land, as we know, is very important in the mind of farmers. So China is making these reforms. Why? Because they've understood that the push towards the city is not as strong as before, but now there is a little bit of a pull into the rural hukou. And so China now is relaxing the assignment of urban hukou, because it knows that not everyone is waiting outside the door to get the hukou. And now the government actually wants to get the land from the farmers. So let's be careful when we judge, because the rights of the human beings of the farmers is not necessarily guaranteed by allowing them to swap the rural for urban hukou. It's always another side of the story. Another important topic is the development of science and technology. China will grow this expenditure at about 7% per year. This is what the plan says in the next 5 years. And this is a little bit more, we think, if my theory is correct, of lower but better GDP growth. So this means that the intensity of research and development of GDP will grow more and more over the next 5 years. And this is a key input of development, especially, and here we have semiconductor. So this is important. This is a big battle between US, Taiwanese companies, Korean. China is still behind on the production of semiconductor of higher in the high-end technology 753 nanometers. China is still behind. So the other three players have a key advantage, but China wants to narrow this gap, wants to invest so that this gap that they are aware of, they would like it to narrow, and they want to move the capabilities towards these very, very few nanometers. The smaller the size, the better the semiconductor. So they want to move towards 7, 5, and 3 nanometers. And this is where a lot of this spending in research will go. So this is the plan of Xi Jinping plan. So I do not agree with the ending, as I said at the beginning. I think it's a lot of a logical leap. Digital information economies are becoming increasingly important. Yes, and then it says that the only way that China can achieve this is by transparency, openness, and institutional flexibility. Now, yes, transparency is good. We always ask for it. Openness, yes, we'd like China to be more open. These are kind of obvious, and we wish for better transparency and better openness, better market access, for example. But I also believe that beyond the meaning of these two terms that are generally acceptable, openness and transparency, I think the institutional transparency, they have it already. The thing is that it's them that decide. They have so much flexibility that they do manage it. I know what the author would like to say. Would like to say that we manage their flexibility. No, the China, as I said, is an extremely flexible and adaptable system that changes according to the crisis, and that's why they do have crises. They face them, and in most cases they do succeed in solving them, as in happened in 2008, and the COVID crisis, and even the economic crisis. So they do have the flexibility. So let's not wish for China to have flexibility, because they have it already. The thing is that they run it by themselves. So I hope this analysis has been useful on Professor Magnus. I remind you, is a professor at University of Oxford at the China Centre and University of London, SOAS. Have a good day. Goodbye.